Hello, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. So you hear me talking about TV as much as I do about search or SEO or social or any other tactic or channel. Most marketers don't talk enough about it, but a lot of brands still spend a large chunk of their advertising budget on TV. If you want that full view of the customer's journey, where they're seeing you across all the touch points, then you need to learn more about TV and not just what videos a dozen people or so like or share on Facebook or TikTok. To drive real revenue growth, TV is very often an important channel, and you've got to pay attention to what the industry is doing, especially in regards to how advertising is changing. Many of these concepts and a lot more were discussed at the TV of Tomorrow show in New York, where I spoke with today's guest on a panel discussing an addressable TV mini track with insights from addressable's pioneers. Chris Pizzurro is the VP and head of global sales at Canoe Ventures, a pioneer in addressable TV, and an Emmy Award and Webby Award nominee with decades of experience in media marketing and advertising sales of traditional TV and digital media. And on this episode, we'll discuss some of the state of TV today, tomorrow, and the future, addressable advertising, video on demand, competing with Fang, Godfather movie references, New York versus San Francisco, the Delaware River, and a lot more. So let's tune in to a fellow pioneer of addressable TV with a truly pioneer shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. All right, so Chris, thank you so much for joining me today on A Shark's Perspective. It is, we're at a very interesting location today in New York, recording the show, but if you will, tell the people a little bit about yourself. I know everybody at this event knows who you are, but for people in the world that don't know your background, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Well, Kenneth, if you stick around doing this for 30 years, first of all, thank you very much. A pleasure to be here. Great to be here at the show. I work at a company called Canoe, and we do ad technology play, essentially, but grew up in the industry, worked to turn to broadcasting for 13 years, really learned the craft there, right? Exposed to just a lot of great salespeople, a lot of great technology people. So that's really where I got a lot of my learning, and did some agency work before Canoe, and then came over to Canoe and really started to build the business here over the last 8 or 9 years.
Yeah, it's very interesting, though. I speak at a lot of conferences and know a lot of the speakers at marketing conferences, but at advertising conference, everybody knows everybody. And I've been in this space for a little while, but it's very interesting that 75% of the people know who you are. 75% of the people know who a lot of the people that were on our panel today. They know who each other are. They know, and they've known them for quite a few years, because if you've been in this space, especially in TV, everybody sort of knows each other. And
I assume it's kind of that way in a lot of industries, right?
Yeah.
When you kind of get down to the brass tacks and kind of how things are done. When you take the broad strokes of advertising and then take it down to TV and then take it down to cable within TV or something, it does start to get to, well, there's a finite amount of people who really now know how to make the sausage and get it all to work. And that's why it's great to be here at TVOT in this conference, because it's a lot of this the real sausage makers, which is great, right? There's some conferences that are a level higher or a level lower, and they're wonderful and they have their place, but this one is good, that it is essentially a lot of folks who just get things done, and it's a good place for us to just sort of catch up and get the state of the state from each other.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've told you this before. I sort of felt like I needed to justify myself, having been in the space for a while, but I almost sort of needed as a calling card to let people know I've done 350 campaigns, addressable campaigns. I've had some of the people here yell at me. I've gained my scars, if you will, and you almost need that for some of the credibility, but it does at least establish there's some thought leaders, especially in this space in advertising in New York. But when you look at this show versus the other TV shows, you speak at a lot of them. So you're speaking in another one over in London?
In London next week, yeah.
So how do you look at this show compared to the others?
It is.
Knowing that Tracy can't hear us right now.
Yeah, right. I don't know. Maybe she has this booth bugged or something. I don't know. But I touched on a little bit is that it is right at the level of I'd call it even more than the thought leaders. They're actually the thought doers.
Yeah, true.
Which is nice, because that, as we were saying before, right? You kind of, that takes you down the funnel even another level, right?
It's not fluff.
Yeah, it is. It is not fluff, and you've got to know your stuff here. As the panel we did this morning, there's some people on there that they'll call BS on you in a second.
Absolutely.
And that's healthy and that's good. And I think what's key now is this was called TV of Tomorrow 10 years ago, and that's what it was, TV of Tomorrow. She could start to change the name to like TV of Today, because we are there. And as opposed to maybe 10 years ago, it was a nice science experiment or looking to the future and all of that. But now the folks that are here are responsible for a good chunk of the dollars that are now being placed with TV. There's a certain level of responsibility, and the people here take that seriously.
So you're very involved, though, especially on a sales role, enabling that VOD buy. Talk a little bit, describe a little bit about what you guys do at Canoe with VOD buy on a national scale.
Sure. So I'll take it from the consumer level, right? Just say you're a consumer and you want to go to ABC and you want to watch, Blackish.
Shark Tank.
Yeah, Shark Tank. Sure. Okay.
Apropos for
fair
me.
Apropos. Very good. Okay. So you go and you pick Shark Tank episode 15 from your VOD menu on Comcast X1, and the show starts to play, and an ad comes up. That whole back-end technology to get the ad there, to get the reporting back, that's all going through our Canoe ecosystem, right? So there's a lot of moving parts and involved in that. There's a lot of tech work that happens both on the ABC side and on the Comcast side and all of that. And we do that across now 4 cable operators across Comcast, Cox Charter, and Frontier. So there's a great level of complexity. And we not only do that for ABC, but we do it for another 120 networks. So when you take that many instances happening, that's what we do is keep that all up and running in a safe and secure manner on a day in and day out basis.
Yeah, and so which one is more technically complex? I'm assuming it's with the MVPDs.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the majority of our work is on the MVPD side. And we have a little adage around Canoe is, as a consumer, you don't call your cable company up and you say, hey, there's no ads in my ABC show, right? That doesn't happen. The consumer goes, great, there's no ads in my ABC show. I'm not going to tell anyone. So it's our responsibility to identify the problems, then go and fix the problems. So it's a very unique place to be. And we joke also, it's kind of like we work in a grocery store and they're like, clean up in aisle 6. And that's what we do, right? We just clean it up and make it so that ultimately for the ad agencies that are here and for the brands that are here, that when they buy 1 million impressions on ABC Shark Tank, that they're gonna get 1 million impressions that they bought.
Now, I don't know this with Canoe. I've known of Canoe for years, but where are you with virtual MPDs?
Yeah. So today we don't work directly for, say, a Hulu or a Roku. Okay. But what we do is follow the VOD service for our MSOs, for our MVPDs. So, for instance, if you have Charter Spectrum, you're a Charter Spectrum customer. If you choose not to watch it on the set-top box, but you want to just download the Spectrum app, and you want to put it on your Roku in your ski house or in your beach house or something, basically that's a virtual MVPD. That we do watch over that. So it's a virtual MVPD product from our physical MVPD. So that's how we do that.
So from a creative standpoint for the advertiser and how it benefits them, what kind of interesting things can I kind of expect other than just buying an ad coming through you? Where does this turn into a lift?
Sure.
Ultimately, and because that's really trying to measure that spend. Where does that turn into more of a lift using running through you as opposed just a regular type campaign?
So we started out by keeping it very simple and being straightforward and just say, hey, you know what? This is really not any different than you buying linear TV, till it isn't. Right. Because while many people say, oh, I like change and I like new things, especially in advertising or business, people really don't, right?
Yeah.
They like incremental change, right? So if you come out of the gate and you try to get too fancy, people get scared off. So we purposely said it's just like linear till it isn't. And it isn't like linear when instead of watching Shark Tank at 8 o'clock on a Friday night, I can now watch the show whenever I want. So that's really the main difference.
Yeah.
And I'm still going to put the ad in front of them, and I'm still going to measure it. So we didn't get fancy out of the gate of, well, it's better targeting and a whole bunch of other things. We just said, look, you're just following the consumer. They used to watch it at 8 p.m. on a Friday night. Now they want to watch it at 2 p.m. in the afternoon because that's the way their schedule allows. So that was kind of the basis. And that worked fairly well because ultimately brands, they just want to reach the eyeballs. And so we kept the argument pretty simple. Now, what we have found out is the way the business has developed is because of a few different factors. One is what I call the Netflix factor, where you can't have in on-demand an 8-ad break anymore, right? You can't get away with that in an on-demand world. You can get away with it at linear, I think, because the consumer was just sort of trained that way. It went from 4 ads to 5 ads to 6 ads to 7 ads, and they still accept it in a linear.
Yeah.
But
it's a little bit of a zombie mentality.
They have a zombie mentality and all that. But when you're an on-demand and you went and you picked that show, if you're doing more than 4 ads, the consumer starts to see through the illusion, right? So what's happened is we looked at all our set-top box data, and when we tried to go to 5 ads or 6 ads, the consumer would just get out of the stream. They would leave, right? So we know 4 is the magic number. So the benefit that comes from that from the advertiser is, now Mr. Advertiser, you're now one of 4 things for the consumer to remember instead of one of 8 things, right? So there's more chance for brand recall and all those things that an agency does. So we did then do studies on brand recall and brand lift and all those sort of things. And sure, in a VOD environment, those things go up, right? Double digits, 12, 14, 15%. And I do think it's basically because of that Netflix factor, and now you're one of 4. So all those things were just sort of byproducts that we found. I also have a lot of now that's happening linear too, like direct to consumer, DTC advertisers that come on, and the key with them is all those people are so metrics driven. If you weren't generating calls or visits to the website to buy the product, they're not going to come back. And I have a fairly good amount of those DTC clients that are utilizing VOD, which, I don't know their internal metrics for continuing to come back, but the way that business operates, if you're not delivering, they're just not going to come back.
Well, and that's so many of them, unfortunately, and I talk about this a lot of times at conferences, is they don't know how to optimize their digital campaigns with TV. And so that becomes the bigger problem of why somebody didn't get a lift, is they didn't know when to run the ads in conjunction. I mean, Mary Meeker's report talks about using that phone as a second device 88% of the time in your hand when you're watching TV. Sure. You can optimize your mobile campaigns when those run, and that's going to trigger a lift or when they go buy it. But that unfortunately for a lot of people, they still don't understand how to do that.
Yeah.
Or we talked about this morning on the panel. I brought this up because I speak at a lot of marketing conferences, and so often not enough of them pay attention enough in digital marketing. They don't pay enough attention to TV. And so, I try to help educate the market as much as I can, having been somebody focused on lead gen and sales a lot of my career, and where to optimize these kind of things and look at them a little bit differently. But as I was thinking through some of the questions we were talking about this morning as to where you saw the future of TV and what is the future? It seemed like 6 months ago when we were at this conference in San Francisco, it seemed a little, not depressing, but it seemed like there were just some of the speeches that felt like it was the TV is dying. And here today from us and from multiple people, everybody's defending it. I mean, you're starting to see brands like Adidas come out and say they've overinvested in digital, couldn't find the reach. And that usually starts resonating when you bring up a name like Adidas that everybody's heard of. But you've also got a lot of people that are middle-aged and older who have done TV the wrong way for a lot of years. And then you've got your digital natives who haven't run it at all. Somewhere in the middle is that sweet spot for folks like us that are, of course, the younger millennials.
Thank you.
Who know that form of TV advertising
that,
well. Yeah, you're welcome. But, that's what we're having to help educate on, is to fit that sweet spot. So where do you see where TV is today and where you think it'll go in the future? Is it going to be extremely viable? We know it's not dying. It's evolving, but it's not dying.
Yeah. So a few things there, right, to discuss. I think first thing
is a 45-minute question.
Yeah, right. I do believe that, yes, there's a bit of the Empire Strikes Back going on right now, right? So I think we're somewhere in the second movie right now, and a third one is certainly going to be told at some point. But as far as right now, yes, there's absolutely the traditional MVPDs and the programmers who 30 years ago when this started out, and we touched on this on your panel a little bit, we're great friends, and they launched cable together, right? Yeah. Programmers, knew that they were selling the distributors boxes, and then as the money started flowing and people just started entrenching themselves a little bit, then it became a little contentious between the programmers and the distributors. And what I've seen happen in the last couple years, because of FANG, Facebook, Google, the threats of the digital guys and everything that's going on, that the atmosphere has changed dramatically, really dramatically. Mm-hmm. I mean, even to the point where in this conference, Sean Kaur from Viacom was sitting up with Marcy and Jenks from Comcast, and maybe 3 years ago, probably wouldn't see that keynote kind of conversation. It's like bringing together
the five families now.
Kind of bringing together the five families. And hopefully there's not a horse head in my bed, but Google that, kids. You can see what we're talking about. So I think that's healthy. I think that's good, and we've seen it happen a few times during the industry. When the satellite guys came in, the cable guys kind of gathered around. But even now, everything that we do with Comcast, Cox, Charter, Frontier, we're even from our point of view starting to have some early conversations with some of the satellite guys, and Frontier's a telco. Mm-hmm. So I definitely have seen a change even since we last met earlier in the summer, even in the last 6 to 8 months. Just how much people are really focused on. Okay, we need to work a little harder and a little quicker together. Absolutely happening. Where does that go? I've seen just in our VOD universe that we've done an integration between our old hardcore systems and cable that we have down at the cable, and the programmers' digital systems like Freewheel and Google Ad Manager and a few other ones. Where 4 years ago when we did those integrations, my guys were speaking French, the digital guys were speaking Swahili, and some other guy was speaking Chinese, figuratively I'm speaking, of course. And now my guys get in a room with the Google guys or the Freewheel guys, and everyone's just talking about how we get. They're all sharing and how do we get this.
They're sharing the same Rosetta Stone.
Yeah, they are sharing the same. So so I think that's the future. I think it really just will be premium video, accessed a whole bunch of different ways, and a bunch of folks making that happen.
Yeah, there's just been so much misinformation that and I talk about this a lot at conferences. Everybody it feels like they've looked at Google Trends, and they're all regurgitating the same speech of where TV is jumping all to digital marketing spend, but then they don't count that part of the digital advancements is that Netflix is digital.
Right.
I watch it on a 65-inch laptop called the TV, and there's different ways of shaping that from a budget fight standpoint, but you also see it because you're on a lot of the sales calls. There's another thing we talked about is where do marketers when they're positioning themselves in sort of a turf war, what are you starting to see with marketers fighting for dollars for who's running the campaigns versus digital versus whether or not it's with the TV team?
Sure.
You covered that this morning really well, so I want you to bring that back up.
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly seen where the TV buyers were ignoring some things for quite some time, and really just saying, well, so at first there was no problem. Everyone just claimed there was no problem. Then they complained, well, there is a problem, but Nielsen's wrong.
Yeah.
Right? So
needed some common enemy.
You needed some common enemy. So and now everyone just kind of said, that whatever the stages of denial are, or whatever. Right now there's acceptance, or whatever that is. So now there's acceptance, and people are learning to deal with that. But what I saw from the TV buyers is they did start to do a land grab, right? A bit of the Empire Strikes Back on the advertising side. So what those TV buyers essentially said is, hey, Mr. Client, you're doing that digital video buy over with that other digital agency, and they're paying $35 CPM. Well, I'm buying TV from that guy at $15.
Right.
So shouldn't you let me buy it? And even if I get $20, you're still up $10.
Exactly.
Right? So there was that kind of stuff that was going on. And fast forward to today, a couple of years later, and you essentially have a TV buyer doing a video buy that includes broadband, that includes VOD, that includes TV. And the client's happy because he doesn't have to necessarily pay the $30.
Yeah.
Some of the TV networks are somewhat happy because instead of getting $15, they're getting $20. So there's broad numbers there and that all that sort of thing. But that's a lot of what went on in the last few years.
Yeah, and if the TV buyers are positioned right, then they probably are going to have their hand in the kettle for some of that digital placement anywhere as well. So.
Oh yeah. No, they're positioning themselves for exactly that. And I think too the client just wants to say, look, this was TV money. Yeah. Right, and it's this 70 billion or whatever it is. TV's fragmenting. It should be under that TV buyer.
Yeah, got to break down the silos.
Yeah, you got to break down the silos and build it back up under them. They of course then need, just like everyone needs, the discipline to be able to know the difference between your platforms and everything. Right. So it's not just as simple as I bought TV and I'm out. But certainly that's the trend of what's going on.
Yeah, we've had for years one group arrogant enough to buy one way, and they were replaced with another group who was just as arrogant. And at some point, maybe they'll get along. Right. Well, so we talked about addressable TV on the panel this morning. I love that they labeled us all pioneers. You guys had a few more pioneers, and Garrett had quite a few more pioneer years than most of us. But are you bullish on addressable? You said earlier you didn't position yourselves with Canoe initially with addressable to kind of keep it simple. But where are you with addressable as far as how you look at that market?
Yeah. So, yes, we now are very bullish on addressable. We have not been. And it really back to sort of that relationship between the national programmer and the MVPD. So when it came to addressable, the MVPDs kept that inventory, that capability for themselves, and we're not letting the national programmer really participate in that to any great extent. And what we've seen over the last year is that starting to open up, which is great. And then most recently, we're here at the show, and we started to announce this a couple weeks ago and drilled it home a little bit more. But now Canoe has been asked to enable addressability for a national programmer. So instead of just a Comcast maybe doing addressable on their local inventory, we can now help, say, ABC and Shark Tank be able to do addressable on their inventory on a national level. So that's back to people have been saying for the last 10 years that should happen. So we're finally in the early innings of that. But we're over that sort of business hurdle of, artificial business hurdle. But once again, because of the threat of FANG and all these other sorts of things, that ice has finally melted, and we're there, and we're excited about that.
So, Chris, you're on a shark's perspective. I ask this of everybody: what is your favorite kind of shark, and why? I mean, we are, you could pick ones in the water, you could pick ones on Shark Tank, or you could pick any of the ones down a few blocks down towards Wall Street.
Let's see, what kind of shark? I guess a hammerhead.
Beautiful.
Because sometimes as a born and bred gritty New Yorker, I have to pound some people over the head to get stuff done. So I guess that's fitting if you've ever worked for me. If you've maybe asked some people who have worked for me, maybe they'll say that.
Well, Chris, it's that time of my show. Now that we're almost out of here, but it's that time on the show for me to ask, are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions you're going to be asked today?
Fire away.
Okay, so this will be on demand per what you asked or referenced earlier with the horse head. So I've got to ask, number 1, Godfather 1 or Godfather 2?
Godfather 2.
Why so?
When has a sequel ever surpassed the first one? Maybe Aliens over Alien?
Oh, good. Yeah, it's
pretty close on the sequel.
But Aliens 2 wasn't as good as Godfather 2.
Correct. Yes.
Different genre. So number 2 is a TV question you weren't going to expect. Alex Trebek or Pat Sajak? They've both been in the news a lot for health reasons.
I got to go with Alex Trebek as a longtime Jeopardy fan.
Yeah.
Sometimes a little too arrogant for me, but you got to give him.
You'll take Alex for 200.
Yeah, I will take Alex for 200. Yes.
All right. Number 3. You moderating a panel with me as a guest in San Francisco, or me moderating a panel with you as a guest here in New York?
I think you moderating me, not just me, but the folks we had this morning. We had some people who like to throw some curveballs.
Yeah,
and I think you handled that brilliantly. So hats off to you.
I appreciate that. That includes the questions afterwards. So number 4, TVOT New York or TVOT San Francisco?
TVOT San Francisco, because I had never been to the Presidio before Tracy held it out there, and just a wonderful venue.
And it's nice to get away from the office.
From everything,
yeah.
Right? Just from everything. It really is. It made me want to be a soldier in 1942 without the war part and just hang out. So it's nice.
All right, number 5, and the most important question you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Ooh. I guess a little cornbread.
Good man. Yeah. So, Chris, where can people find out more about you, Canoe?
Yeah,
the whole
certainly. You can follow me Twitter at Chris Pizzurro, Pizzurro, or for Canoe, go to CanoeVentures.com, all one word, and we'd love to see you follow us or hear from us.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris, for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Kenneth, thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
So there was my conversation with Chris Pizzurro, the VP and head of global sales at Canoe Ventures, a pioneer in addressable TV and an Emmy Award and Webby Award nominee with decades of experience in media marketing and advertising sales of traditional TV and digital media. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, I've mentioned this on previous episodes, but speaking in industry conferences, especially advertising, allows you a different level of networking than general marketing conferences, and oftentimes much better conversations with the speakers and attendees in that space, especially as they niche down. They generally don't have the keynotes that sell a gazillion books, some do, but many times it's the ones who take a very deep dive into whatever the medium is, especially the sausage making process as described, whether it's TV, fintech, metal fabricators, whatever. The reason I mention that is that you need to attend a mixture of both. If you're a marketer, for example, then try to attend something other than a general marketing conference. I enjoy the TV industry talks so much because I've delivered a lot of campaigns, including those that sophisticatedly worked in conjunction with search, email, social, and direct mail. My point is that you've got to look at all the channels that your customer sees when looking at your brand, and you've got to align the strategies and optimize those campaigns in order to drive true lift. For a lot of us who care about both TV and digital marketing, we know that the performance-driven mindset includes TV as a powerful channel. One simple test that I've mentioned before, I always like to remind people of, is to turn off your TV campaigns if you don't believe that TV works. Then as you listen to the sound of crickets with phones not ringing, then you'll realize it can be a significant trigger. Just make absolutely certain to optimize especially your mobile campaigns when you do, since that's where they'll often go to do the search after a TV ad airs. And then you've got to remember to not just look at last click as the conversion. When working together with other channels, mobile or any other, TV can provide such significant lifts. They all should work together. Second, as Chris pointed out and a lot of people discussed at the show, TV is expressing more interest today in learning to play with rather than against FANG, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. Generally speaking, I still see that TV is somewhat on the defensive. Marketers of all shapes and sizes are simply seeing more pressure to deliver on ad spend. It's not all direct-to-consumer brands that think this way. It's every CMO who needs to increase sales and thinks about where to put the ad spend to drive that growth. By nature, people like search, which I'm absolutely a big fan of. Google, which basically owns 90% of the market, gave this brilliant gift to marketers with Google Analytics. Its closest competitor, Bing, is only about 10%, so it competes not so much. TV dollars can go to several MVPDs, and now also to many more virtual, or rather VMPDs, so there's sometimes too many options, and in this case, not enough true attribution. And not just modeled, because even at best, that's still somewhat of a guess, if you will. Google owns, for the most part, search as a channel, Amazon for commerce, Facebook for social. TV doesn't have one true dominant player who could provide that kind of GA platform. And there's a stiff amount of competition, of course, for those ad dollars. That won't go away, but marketers need more today than to hear we know it works. My message is TV is a great channel. It just needs more mobility to optimize more quickly and a truer view of attribution. Third, so at the TV of Tomorrow show in New York, several of us were discussing addressable TV, what it is and what is its future. Earlier the same week, I had spoken at a different conference, a digital marketing one, about the convergence of TV and digital. I asked that audience of several hundred how many had done addressable TV campaigns. Very, very few raised their hands. It's still in early adoption for a lot of reasons, but smarter brands know the true value. Chris said that their team, in fact, had also grown very bullish on it. If you believe in targeting the right audience, and if you believe in serving more relevant ads to people, and if you believe your ads work, and if you believe that you shouldn't spend your ad dollars without knowing how they will perform, and if you have even $100,000 to spend on a local or national ad campaign, then you should try addressable TV. It's not the exact same as what you would do on Google with optimization, just like that isn't the same thing with what you would do on Facebook with frequency capping and so on. However, if you do it, especially if you do it in conjunction with other channels as part of your campaigns, again with smarter targeting, then you'll very likely see a double-digit lift. I've just seen it happen too many times in my career. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. It's been my privilege to speak with you today, and I thank you for your time. So tear down those walled gardens, break down silos, focus more on your customer, and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.